Sí, hola, sí. Sí, sí,
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we try to discover and chart a progressive path forward when it comes to migration policy and migration politics. And it's great to be having this discussion in Spain, and it's great to be having this discussion now, where just a few days ago, Prime Minister Sánchez signed the regularization law, which will offer a path to dignity for an estimated 500,000 people. And one of the things that we'd like to do this morning is to explore how Spain's approach to migration serves as an example of the kind of forward-looking progressive model, how it connects with developments elsewhere, such as Mexico, and elsewhere in the world, and how it contrasts with more punitive and authoritarian migration politics everywhere, including, of course, in the United States and the United Kingdom lately, where I'm hoping that we'll be able to explore over the next 45 minutes what a win-win approach to human mobility looks like and what a progressive approach to human mobility looks like. And I'll start by inviting Minister Sáenz Delgado to talk to us about these pillars of Spain's migration policy, this moment that we had with the regularization, and I would like to congratulate your government for getting that through, and how you combine rights, inclusion, regularization with social cohesion. So, Minister, please.
Bueno, voy a continuar en español. Buenos días, es un placer compartir con todos vosotros este espacio. Bueno, ya llevamos unas horas en este importante encuentro y, desde luego, yo creo que hay una cosa que quiero compartir esta mañana y quiero ser muy clara, y es que yo creo que es importante que hablemos con orgullo, levantando la cabeza, de la política migratoria del Gobierno de España. Porque quizás, bueno, pues ese es el primer punto, ¿no? El poder combatir esos discursos de odio, de desinformación, racistas y xenófobos, bueno, pues con contundencia, con que lideremos la conversación, porque hay motivos para ello. Y ayer escuchaba al alcalde de Bruselas que solamente con estos primeros contactos pues ya me ha pedido que vayamos a contar allí, en Bruselas, cómo lo estamos haciendo, cuál es el enfoque, cuál es la coherencia que tiene el Gobierno de España en esta importante política que forma parte, como bien decías, de la agenda central y de la conversación. Así que el primer mensaje es que tenemos que hablar y tenemos que contar, porque forma parte de los valores más arraigados que compartimos los progresistas, valores como la empatía, la solidaridad, el ponerse en el lugar de otro, los derechos de ciudadanía. Bueno, pues a fin de cuentas, pues eso es en esencia la política migratoria del Gobierno de España. Y además la narrativa tiene que ir acompañada de credibilidad, y la credibilidad la acompañamos con los datos y con las evidencias. Estamos inmersos, acaba de comenzar un proceso de regularización extraordinaria en nuestro país, pero que es que no es la primera vez que ponemos en marcha un procedimiento así. De hecho, la última vez que esto pasó en España fue con otro líder progresista importantísimo, que es el presidente Zapatero. Y tenemos cifras y tenemos evidencias de qué supuso eso para la vida de miles de ciudadanos. Por supuesto, eso lo primero, pero también qué supuso, qué impacto tuvo en nuestra sociedad. Y doy algunos datos. Se multiplicaron por 4 anualmente las personas afiliadas a la Seguridad Social. Indudablemente había que tomar una elección. ¿Qué queremos? ¿Queremos que la gente esté en nuestro país sin derechos, escondida, viviendo con miedo, o que tenga derechos, dignidad, justicia social? El camino está claro. Así que, bueno, insisto además también que las evidencias nos acompañan. Este proceso de regularización extraordinaria no es un hecho puntual, es un punto de un conjunto que es la política migratoria del Gobierno de España, que sabemos que la migración irregular es un drama humanitario, que cuesta vidas, y por eso todo el enfoque va orientado hacia una política migratoria que defienda la migración regular, ordenada y segura. Y también las cifras de reducción de llegadas irregulares están más bajas que nunca. Cuando escuchamos a políticas antagónicas, hay otros gobiernos, como por ejemplo Italia, que tiene posiciones antagónicas en política migratoria, pero es que tampoco están sus cifras de migración irregular mejores que las de nuestro país. Por eso es tan importante, indico, la coherencia que estamos teniendo en esta política global. Sé que para que podamos combatir entre todos, porque yo creo que esto es una labor que tenemos que hacer todos, los discursos de odio, racistas y xenófobas, tenemos que tener datos importantes. Por eso hay 2 estudios que desde el Ministerio hemos encargado y creo que revelan unos datos que nos pueden ayudar y os pueden ayudar para que contéis y nos ayudéis y que bueno, pues que esa narrativa positiva de la importancia de la migración acompañe nuestros valores socialdemócratas. El primero de ellos es que le hemos puesto cifras al racismo. Además de que es una cuestión de valores y de compromiso con la igualdad de oportunidades, vemos que el racismo y la xenofobia impactan directamente en el desarrollo económico de un país. Un estudio encargado a la Complutense por parte del Ministerio cifra en 17.000 millones de euros al año el impacto en el PIB del racismo educativo, del racismo, la xenofobia en materia laboral, de la discriminación laboral y la discriminación educativa. Y el segundo estudio que quiero compartir, y no me quiero extender porque somos muchos hoy hablando, es un estudio que hace una proyección de cómo sería España en 2070 si se redujeran un 30% los flujos migratorios. Y las consecuencias son nefastas. Los colegios estarían vacíos, habría menos explotaciones agrícolas, habría muchos médicos y profesionales sanitarios. Tendríamos que aportar mucho más para sostener algo que nos ha costado tanto construir, que es nuestro estado de bienestar, de protección social. Así es que invito, ya con esto voy terminando, a que lo contemos. Esta regularización, como os digo, es una etapa más en el camino. Una etapa más, la siguiente será en lo que estamos trabajando en un plan de integración donde tenemos que estar todas las administraciones. No solamente es una cuestión de un gobierno, de un país, sino que hay que implicar a todas las administraciones. Estamos viendo cómo hay algunas que se están empeñando en boicotear en este proceso que acaba de comenzar, poner trabas en el camino. No boicotean a un gobierno progresista, no boicotean a Pedro Sánchez, boicotean a miles de ciudadanos que tienen las esperanzas puestas y que tienen derechos, también obligaciones, pero que tienen derechos. Así que en ese plan y en ese mensaje de apelar a que esto es una labor conjunta, con dignidad, levantando la cabeza con valentía, hablemos de migración en los términos en los que la entendemos, como derechos de ciudadanía y como los valores más intrínsecos que tenemos los progresistas. Lo dejo ahí por el momento.
Thank you very much for laying out such a forceful and powerful both human rights, social and economic case for why what your government has done is indeed the right thing. And I'd like to turn to Senator Beatriz Paredes Rangel, former president of the PRI in Mexico, where Mexico, of course, at the border of the United States, disproportionately affected by the elections, the outcome, the Trump administration, the politics on immigration. Of course, Mexico, a host of many migrants itself. From your perspective, what are the dynamics shaping this debate? How do they interact with what we just heard from the minister? What kind of narratives, coalitions, policies do we need as we move forward? So, please.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días. Yo quiero agradecer compartir este panel con ustedes. Seré lo más breve posible en un tema tan complejo y quiero saludar al dirigente regional de la Internacional Socialista. Muchas gracias, Miguel, por su presencia y de nuestros compañeros y colegas de la región de América Latina. Bueno, y saludar al general Lázaro Cárdenas, que recibió al exilio español. ¿Más?
Another mic, this one? This one?
Okay. Recordar al presidente Lázaro Cárdenas que recibió al exilio español republicano en México. México tuvo varias décadas una tradición de asilo muy notable para la historia del mundo y para la etapa en que América del Sur vivió dictaduras feroces. Y tanto el exilio republicano español como el exilio chileno, como el exilio brasileño, como el exilio argentino y uruguayo, fueron a enriquecer extraordinariamente el mundo académico y de creatividad de nuestro país. México es simultáneamente un país de expulsión de fuerza de trabajo, mexicanos que se van principalmente a Estados Unidos, de tránsito de migrantes básicamente centroamericanos y ahora algunos caribeños, y de acogida de este exilio que existió por razones políticas, pero también recientemente por la evolución de la economía mexicana, de exilio masivo, particularmente de guatemaltecos en la zona sur del país. Entonces, la política migratoria mexicana es muy compleja y tiene la circunstancia dramática de que su correlación con el país de recepción más importante para los mexicanos, que es Estados Unidos, es cotidiana, es permanente y en el caso de Estados Unidos se vuelve un tema de política interior. Esto es muy importante señalarlo, porque me parece que es la reflexión que tenemos que hacer desde las izquierdas. Las derechas en el mundo están convocando a la xenofobia. Es una estrategia fundamental de generarle temor a las poblaciones locales, particularmente a las poblaciones avejentadas. Y el discurso falso de que los migrantes llegan a quitarle el trabajo a los locales, que los migrantes llegan a proteger su salud personal con los impuestos de los locales, de allí pasan al discurso abiertamente racista y xenófobo. Y esto está pasando, desde luego, en Europa, y por eso es mucho más trascendental la posición de España, porque no solo es una posición ética, sino es una posición con racionalidad económica y demográfica. Y enfrenta esta posición racional, demócrata, humanista, el discurso falso que sustenta en desinformación de la sociedad en su conjunto la crítica a la migración y la exigencia de políticas de endurecimiento. Esto, en el caso mexicano, se traduce en el discurso de Trump de poner un muro entre México y Estados Unidos y se traduce en los decretos de Trump para reducir las conquistas que los descendientes de alrededor de 37 millones de personas de origen mexicano que ya viven en Estados Unidos, 37 millones de personas. O sea, el sur de Estados Unidos hay ciudades en donde se habla en español y en español mexicano, como se habla en español dominicano en Nueva York, en muchas regiones, como se habla en español guatemalteco en otras regiones. Desconocer que la movilidad humana tiene que obligatoriamente tener el mismo tratamiento que la movilidad de los capitales, que la movilidad de la tecnología. Este es un mundo en donde la globalización plantea la movilidad general y restrictivamente decimos que los únicos que no tienen derecho a esa movilidad son los seres humanos. Es una incomprensión del momento que vive la historia y hay que pugnar desde la izquierda por una ciudadanía universal que se soporte en estrategias de acogida, de negociación, de análisis de los mercados de trabajo y desde luego de una comprensión de que la demografía de las regiones requieren el fortalecimiento de los migrantes. Concluyo diciendo, nosotros desde las izquierdas no podemos permitir que el tema migratorio sea un tema de seguridad. Ese es un falso debate. El tema migratorio es un tema de respeto a los derechos humanos, de democracia y de reconocimiento de la movilidad en un mundo global. Gracias.
Thank you, Senator. And it's indeed very important to recognize the incredible contribution of Mexican Americans to the United States and migrants, of course, to all of our societies, and you did so very powerfully. I'll stay in the region. I'll turn to Marshall Fitz, whose work with the Emerson Collective in Latin America gives him a unique perspective, let's say, on the alignment between what we've heard from Spain, what we've heard from Mexico, the kind of instruments that create this approach to human mobility that we're looking for. So, Marshall, the floor is yours.
Buenos días a todas y todos. Voy a seguir en inglés para proteger las orejas de los hispanohablantes en la sala y mis colegas aquí. It is not a coincidence that we're having this conversation under the auspices of a forum featuring, among others, the presidents of Spain, Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. These 4 countries are managing migration as well as any other, and they're doing it in fundamentally similar ways. I want to make the case that these countries are and have become a lab for a new progressive migration management model, one grounded in realism, shared and aligned incentives, and proven to work at scale under very serious political pressure. And I want to anchor everything I say under a single, perhaps overly obvious insight. The question is not whether people will continue to move or be forced to move. As the senator just said, they will. The question is whether we will build systems that channel movement toward lawful, mutually beneficial outcomes. If we can accept that simple premise, everything changes, because the debate stops being about whether migration is good or bad, but whether governments are competent or not. For too long, this debate has been trapped in a false binary between compassion and control. Progressives have often responded, unfortunately, to this frame very defensively, offering humanitarian arguments to audiences who are frankly more concerned about order and economic security than they are about moral philosophy. It's a losing strategy, as the 2024 election across the Atlantic recently reinforced. The frame isn't whether we should have open borders or taller walls. The frame that wins is visible and fair government control in service of shared prosperity. Prime Minister Sanchez put it clearly when he told his parliament, immigration is not just a question of humanitarianism. It's necessary for the prosperity of our economy and the sustainability of our welfare state. The key is in managing it well. Indeed, managing it well is the imperative. That's what the public wants. And it's what this new model promises to offer. So what does this new model actually look like? Let me briefly take you through 4 countries that are living it now. Spain's announcement, of course, of a regularization that Manos mentioned at the top of up to 500,000 people, invited critics once again to warn of a magnet effect. They've been issuing that warning since 2005, when Spain legalized 580,000 irregular migrants. But the research is unambiguous. No surge followed the 2005 regularization. Instead, tax revenues grew by more than 4,000 euros per worker per year. And it did so in large part because workers moved from the informal to the formal economy. The Economist just named Spain the best performing economy of the OECD and cited migration and immigration as a primary driver. Colombia did something extraordinary in 2021, facing nearly 3 million Venezuelan migrants, the largest forced displacement in the Western Hemisphere. It adopted a 10-year temporary protection program that granted legal status, work authorization, access to health care and education, regardless of how the people arrived in the country. UNHCR called it the most important humanitarian gesture in decades, but it also generated a $529 million economic boost in 2022 alone, both and. Brazil has maintained an open door policy since 2017 when the Venezuelan migrant crisis began. Its Operation Acogida doesn't just efficiently register people who are arriving at the border, it actively relocates them in concert with the private sector to cities where labor demand exists. Migrants have been matched with jobs in over 930 cities at this point. The result, 98% of Venezuelan nationals in Brazil have regular status. The average salaries of the relocated migrants have grown 12%. Unemployment has dropped on average from 7 months to under 5 months. What Brazil has shown is a crucial insight. Don't allow people to mass at the border. Don't allow that type of saturation to create conflict and chaos at the border. Help move workers to where the economy needs them. They will go and they will thrive. Mexico launched a comprehensive human mobility strategy in 2024. It focused on providing humanitarian assistance to recent arrivals, improving border security, expanding regular migration pathways, and improving living conditions in countries of origin. The current government ratified this multi-pronged strategy when it took office, effectively cementing a shift in Mexico from an origin and transit country primarily to a destination country, as the senator shared with us. These 4 countries are proof of concept operating at scale right now under democratic pressure. They reject the current dominant model of enforcement, externalization, which exports the risks of border control to other countries while importing the economic benefits of labor. But genuine regional partnerships mean co-investment in the conditions that are driving human mobility in the first place, through development cooperation, regional labor frameworks, matching talent, migrant talent, to labor demands both within the countries and across borders. Mexico's strategy points squarely in this direction. So does the broader R4V regional platform, which coordinated the protection of 7 million Venezuelans displaced across Latin America and the Caribbean. And to put a point on why this is the model to pursue, of those 7 million Venezuelans, more than 2/3 have received regular status or refugee recognition from middle-income countries in the global south, largely without the financial support that they were promised by wealthier countries. And if Colombia and Brazil can do this, the question is why wealthier nations in the north are still treating smaller challenges as a civilizational crisis. So what does this moment require of us? I'll be brief and stop. 3 things. First, scale what works. Codify regularization and integration programs in legislation, not executive orders and administrative decrees. Biden's pathways were real, but they were also reversed in a weekend. Durable policy requires institutional design, not just political will. Second, connect origin and destination countries through genuine co-investment, not enforcement contracts that shift liability south. Third, and perhaps most importantly, communicate competence. The argument that wins public opinion isn't these people deserve our empathy, although of course they do. It's we have a plan, it works, and it's working right now in 4 of the most politically contested democracies in the world. Spain, Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico are not isolated experiments. They are the outline for a global standard. We just need to make sure that the rest of the world is paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marshall, for laying out all these brilliant examples of how, it is true that we can pursue these policies. They can work, and what you said at the very end, contested democracies, right? And you can gain the support of voters and their consent to do these policies. And a brief reflection, I was What you started with in the Mexico example, and that's a brilliant point, that having people stranded at borders without the right to work, without the right to enter the country, that's a mistake Europe did in 2015. That became the post that drove Brexit. People languishing is what drives a lot of the discussion and the boost of the far right in the United Kingdom, where Beth comes from. But I'm not going to ask you to zoom into the UK. I'm going to ask you to zoom out to the international level as well. And you know, what are the opportunities and obstacles there in the current global system of migration, refugee system, that could help us stop approaches like what we've just heard to become the norm? And what do we need to fix, if I may, at that point?
Thank you very much, Manos, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this fantastic panel, but particularly it's a particular honor to speak on a panel with the Minister Delgado, who provides us with such an inspiration as to how political leaders should be thinking about approaching these questions. Marshall, you described a crisis of you know, how many more wealthy nations were treating this as a crisis of civilization when it comes to migration, and point to the examples of those countries who are dealing with many more numbers of asylum seekers and migrants as the example to how we should be acting. I want to zoom in a little bit to the UK perspective, but I do want to talk about the global protection system in particular. What I want to say is what I think many of us find so peculiar about the progressive debate in the UK at the moment is how quickly we seem to have lost confidence in our own ideas. It seems almost daily that a new article will be published breathlessly proclaiming the end of the liberal rules-based order, and we are all told to stop grieving and accept the reality. It's Trump and Xi's world now, and we all must live in it. Of course, we all do have to live in it, and it's undoubted that the crumbling of old alliances and strongmen and chaos mongers are reshaping geopolitics. And yet many of us can't shake the unfashionable feeling of caution in throwing out wholesale the old worldview that recognized, and I quote, that the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Nowhere, of course, is this crisis of confidence clearer, certainly in the UK, than on the issue of migration. It is on this issue above any other that the populist right has been most successful in undermining European solidarity and faith in liberal democracy. I would describe it as a feat of incredible gaslighting that the far right have rebranded the system of human rights designed to protect the individual, not the private individual, not private capital, but the private individual from the state, as now the enemy of the people and of democratic sovereignty. And yet, the visible unauthorized arrival of migrants and asylum seekers is driving growing anxiety across Europe and the UK. And it is allowing the far right to argue that progressives are more interested in protecting our international laws and ideas than the priorities of ordinary people. In the UK, since Brexit, we have seen, on average, a year between 20 and 40,000 people cross by small boat from mainland Europe. These numbers must seem tiny compared to Latin America, and are. But European colleagues know where this story has led in the UK, and it's a story that's been echoed across mainland Europe. We have seen violent riots erupt and the largest far-right protests on British streets in a generation. And even for the majority of decent people, there is a growing uncertainty in liberal democracy's ability to deal with globalized challenges of today. As progressives, I do believe we must be deeply curious about what has led us to this point and accept mistakes that we have made along the way, but without accepting the right's diagnosis of the world, and that's why Spain's example is so important. What we suffer from on the left in the UK, I believe, is not a crisis of values, but a crisis of imagination. We need the ambition to use our worldview to shape the future, not through naive idealism, but as Marshall and others on this panel have articulated so well, through credible and pragmatic use of power, rooted in progressive and, yes, liberal values. And, you know, I would make this argument when it comes to revitalizing the international global asylum framework too, and addressing the gaps in its architecture that have been exposed by globalization over many decades. The Refugee Convention and its 67 protocol developed the notion of the right to seek asylum in a country because of an individual's risk of persecution, and it has provided the rules on which Europe and many parts of the world, but not all, asylum systems have operated for the last 75 years. And yet public today sees the system of inconsistencies. They hear their political leaders in the UK speak with two mouths often, as they tell the public they're doing everything possible to stop asylum seekers from arriving, but defend passionately the Refugee Convention that allows unauthorized entry to claim asylum. And our systems appear brittle in response to rapid global change when communications, travel, and trade have connected our world, and of course climate change is making parts of our world less livable. There are some who argue that this is the moment to accept that this rules-based system is at an end, and that, of course, it was never that international or rules-based to begin with. But there is a different option, and again, I think the examples that we've heard on the panel today speak to this, how the system can give, and we should be asking questions of ourselves now, how can the system give control back to communities to welcome and to innovate, and to refugees themselves to find protection, family, and community without resorting to a smuggler? How can we build a global system where individuals could apply for asylum in the UK or in Europe without ever taking a dangerous journey, using technology to destroy the business model of the smugglers, not Frontex? Latin America and the US have shown us the beginnings of this vision. We've heard about some of this today, and I believe we'll hear more in a second, the CHMV program, the Safe Mobility Offices. These were all systems that allowed, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people to access regularized and well-managed pathways to protection. And in the UK, we have our own examples. Over the last 4 years, 200,000 Ukrainians have come to the UK through community sponsorship, not through top-down government-led systems. And that has led to more people coming in the last 4 years than the government has delivered in the last 50. So elsewhere, I've argued that we do need a coalition of the willing to think about how we reimagine our global systems today. The Refugee Convention, can we have a new protocol to the Convention today that establishes some of these principles of cooperation and safe mobility? But it is up to us as progressives to decide whether we rebuild and reimagine these systems or accept their end. But I think we should have confidence in the strength of our movement are ultimately more powerful and more enduring than those of the far right. Our recognition of innate human worth, the value of community, and faith in the ability of values-based, predictable multilateral alliances to solve these complex global challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, and completely agree that we progressives should also be leading that kind of global discussion, because if we don't, or if we refuse to, others will. And of course, the threats to the multilateralism, to the global system, to multilateralism, a lot of them come from the United States and Donald Trump. And Frank has spent decades arguing for immigrant rights in the United States. He was advising campaigns on immigration. So no better person to highlight how the US has been at the center of this punitive authoritarian politics that we're talking about, this deconstruction, let's say, of the global order. What lessons would you highlight for our democracies and other democracies not to let the migration debate be captured that way where it has been captured? How do we take it back? Frank.
Thank you very much. Yo también voy a hablar en inglés, si me permiten. I'm going to make 3 points. Joe Biden failed on immigration. Donald Trump is failing on immigration. And Pedro Sanchez is succeeding on immigration. Now, how do I make these claims? I'm someone who's been an activist and advocate, a so-called policy expert, and a political operative for 40 years, mostly in America, often in Europe as well. The 5-point tests that we use, developed by our friends at More in Common, are the following. Does an immigration system meet these tests? Compassion, control, competence, contribution, and community. So I use these 5 elements to judge Biden, Trump, and Sanchez. Biden was all compassion, very little control. As a result, more than 2 million people a year entered across the southern border with scenes of chaos dominating the daily media. It caused a huge backlash among the public. It led to hundreds of thousands of migrants being spilled into the streets of major cities without any federal government support. This caused huge tensions. The migrants were not eligible to work and contribute, and the incompetence of the Biden administration was a big factor in the election of Donald Trump. As someone who worked on the Harris campaign, I can tell you, cost of living was the #1 issue, but the #2 issue was immigration. And among swing voters, it was Trump's best issue and Harris's worst issue. Now, Trump is failing for a different reason, obviously. He thinks that control requires cruelty, not compassion. He thinks the way to intimidate and to compel immigrants to leave the United States is to deploy armed agents dressed as if for war, to terrorize immigrants, to attack activists, and indeed to kill some activists who show up to protect their neighbors armed only with a video camera and with a whistle to alert their neighbors. As a result, there's a huge backlash against Trump, and immigration has gone from being a positive political factor for the Republican Party to a negative political factor heading into the midterms. A remarkable turnabout, as 2/3 of the American people have turned against Trump's heavy-handed, racist, xenophobic mass deportation scheme. So why do I qualify Spain's approach to immigration as a success? Well, let's look at the factors. Let's look at the policies. Regulated admissions. Refugee and humanitarian protections within limits. Targeted regularization under strict rules that allow people to emerge from the informal sector into the formal sector so that they can enjoy full rights as full members of society. Policing of the labor market so that exploitative employers do not gain an advantage by hiring vulnerable workers. It's one of the reasons, the most remarkable thing about the Spanish example is the support for the policies of this government by both labor and business, something that we should all take note of as we look forward to how do we have progressive policies that work. So as a result, Spain stands apart. Compassion, control, competence, community cohesion, and strong support for the contribution of immigrants who live in Spanish society. As a result, Spain is building. Look, no system is perfect. Immigration is hard to get right. This is almost a miracle that we're witnessing. And I don't say that romantically. I say it like, wow, we have to study and learn from it, because there's finally an example in contrast to the far right's keep them all out, keep them all down, send them all out approach. It's progressive, it's practical, it's pro-growth, and for me, most importantly, as someone who has seen policies fall and rise, it's politically sustainable. So when I look at the Spanish model, I just have to say, I come from a country that once used to call itself a nation of immigrants. It is no longer. Maybe one day we will recover that identity. I hope so. That's what I will work for. But right now, Spain is a country that welcomes immigrants and upholds the rule of law. They have revealed that it's a false choice between order and generosity. In fact, order and generosity go together. And when you look around the world to say, well, what's a country that's both a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws? Spain is it. And what they are displaying is that the best way to be either is to be both. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. And indeed, the Spanish model does reveal how that is a false dichotomy, a false dilemma. And we're coming close to the 45 minutes that we've been allocated. So I'd like to ask the Minister to reflect on what we've just heard and a few words on this path forward from your perspective.
Muchas gracias. El otro día un periodista muy importante de nuestro país contaba una anécdota que me parece muy importante. Decía que estaba en una conversación con unos jóvenes claramente simpatizantes de la extrema derecha y les preguntó que qué soluciones a sus problemas les estaba ofreciendo la extrema derecha. No pudieron contestar absolutamente nada. Se quedaron callados. No tenían nada que contestar a soluciones a sus problemas y a sus desafíos reales. Eso sí, todos abanderaban y defendían, incluso llevaban cánticos de líderes de la extrema derecha en nuestro país. Lo enlazo también con una encuesta que conocimos hace unos meses en nuestro país que tiene que ver, preguntaba que si a la ciudadanía, a la población, si la inmigración era un problema. Cuando la pregunta era si la inmigración era un problema, ocupaba la parte alta de la tabla. Pero cuando la pregunta se hacía de otra manera, o era otra pregunta, no es que se hiciera de otra manera, y decían, pero ¿qué impacto tiene en tu vida diaria la inmigración? Entonces, la preocupación bajaba a la parte última de la tabla. Por eso, quiero también compartir que tuve antes de ayer la ocasión de estar con el presidente del Gobierno y con todas las entidades y sociedad civil que en su momento impulsaron una iniciativa legislativa popular en el Congreso de los Diputados, que salió, por cierto, con 310 votos a favor, la toma en consideración, a pesar de que 2 años más tarde el Partido Popular ha girado claramente y se opone a este proceso de regularización. El presidente tuvo un encuentro con la Iglesia Católica, con los sindicatos, con la patronal, con las entidades sociales del tercer sector, entidades colaboradoras en materia de extranjería, con el Colegio de Abogados, con el Colegio de Obradoras Sociales de nuestro país. Y todas las intervenciones aplaudían esta política migratoria del Gobierno de España. Y decía una de los participantes, cuando las políticas responden a la demanda de la sociedad civil, son un éxito. Pues quiero terminar esto diciendo que alcemos la voz, que contemos que estamos respaldados por la sociedad civil, que un discurso de unos pocos que gritan mucho y que muchas veces lo hacen de una manera muy maleducada, no puede romper algo tan profundo como nuestros propios valores, ¿no? No hablamos solamente de una cuestión de valores, que también de una visión romántica de la política o una solidaridad, que también, por supuesto, hablamos también de qué futuro ofrecemos al país, qué presente y qué futuro, qué respuestas damos a los desafíos de la gente. Y una vez más se demuestra que esta manera de entender la política, esta manera progresista de entender la política, bueno, pues es evidentemente la adecuada y la correcta. Así que, bueno, pues yo creo que con valentía, con saber que estamos haciendo las cosas bien, como dice el presidente Sánchez, teníamos que elegir entre ser un país cerrado y pobre o ser un país abierto y próspero, y está claro que en eso estamos todos trabajando. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And indeed, Spain has showed us that it is possible to have a confident, progressive policy that addresses all of these issues and creates a circumstance for the rest of us to learn. But yeah, Senator, a few words as we have to close. Yes.
Solo porque no puedo obviar un tema en donde requerimos la colaboración de todos. El manejo abusivo sobre los migrantes tiene que ver con la trata de personas y es algo que no podemos ignorar. En la región se les llama enganchadores o polleros que engañan a decenas o de centenas de personas de Centroamérica, diciéndoles que van a llegar a Estados Unidos, les cobran y hay condiciones dramáticas y terribles en ese traslado. Seguramente se da en otras regiones de manera similar. Es indispensable que seamos muy rigurosos con los tratantes de personas. Es una reedición del esclavismo más brutal de otras épocas y debemos exigir que las autoridades actúen con energía y que los estados nacionales compartan información, porque siempre son redes transnacionales. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And that is such an important point to close on. And of course, the best way to beat criminal smuggling groups is to make sure that people have safe alternatives, that people have the ability to go to a Spanish embassy as they do to apply for protection, make sure that more people are able to access those routes so people can come orderly, right? People can come like the 200,000 Ukrainians, like the millions, I believe, of people that have reached the United States through safe and legal pathways. And we have to have the confidence to pursue this, because Spain shows these politics can also survive contact with democratic politics in ways where harsh measures or trying to limit people's rights and have them live in less dignified conditions cannot. So I would like to thank everyone on the panel, Minister, Senator, my colleagues and friends, and thanks to all of you who came here. Enjoy the mobilization.